We'll be going over IRS Notice CP21E. You might receive this notice from the IRS if you've recently been audited, and as a result of the audit, your tax bill is going up. So in this video, we can see that the sample that the IRS has on their website is A, dated, and B, heavily redacted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zip on down real quick to the last page here. There's a link right here where we can learn a little bit more information. And then once we kind of highlight that, we'll come back and go through this in more depth. So CP21E, the bottom line is you had an audit. The IRS made changes to your tax return. You might be due a refund. You might have zero balance, or you might owe money. It all depends on what came out of the audit. So we'll go over this in a little bit more depth momentarily. We're going to go back to the notice itself, though. So in this case, we can see that the audit resulted in an increase in the taxpayer's bill. So before we go too far into details on that, we're going to take a look at the upper right-hand corner. So as we noted earlier, this is CP notice or IRS notice CP21E. This is for tax year 2004. The notice date is March 2nd, 2009. So it's probably a little bit later than most audits that I've experienced or heard of, but there could be a number of reasons for that. So it's definitely well within the collection window. But if I were in your situation, I would pay attention to the notice date, because in this case, the IRS is actually expecting you to do something. They're expecting you to either pay the amount that was in the billing summary, or they expect you to come back within a reasonable period of time to discuss any differences of opinion with the IRS. So I'm going to zip on down here because if you don't respond within a certain period of time, for example, right here, it says if the IRS doesn't hear from you, they're just going to assume that you agree with the information in the notice. So in this case, the due date is an actual date. Sometimes they'll say, please do this within 21 days. Usually payment windows are 21 days. And if you look at the notice date, March 2nd, and the payment date, March 23rd, that kind of makes sense. There's probably a little bit more verbiage about what happens if you disagree. I can't find that. Some notices, it's right there. It's pretty obvious within 60 days. Sometimes it's buried a little bit further down in the notice. So whatever the case may be, definitely take note of the notice date, because that's going to be important, particularly if you're considering appealing any imposed tax bill, penalties, or interest. You need there are certain windows that you have to file or to request an appeal. On the left-hand side, this redacted area right here is typically the field for the taxpayer name and address. So pay attention to that. If you've recently moved or relocated, you should consider updating your address within your IRS records, because any lags in you receiving the notices, if the IRS is expecting you to respond within 21 days of the notice date, it doesn't matter that it took a week for your mail to catch up to you. The 21-day, for example, clock starts on the notice date. So if you don't receive this notice until March 10th, and now you're scrambling to try and pay your tax bill by March 23rd, you put yourself behind the eight ball, so to speak, because your address wasn't up to date. So for most taxpayers, it's not an issue. Every time you file a tax return, if you're filing with a new address, the IRS will update your record accordingly. You can also call this 800 number that for some reason is redacted. You can call, validate your information, and change your phone address over the phone. And then the third thing, you can file the official change of address notice. That's IRS Form 8822 or IRS Form 8822-B for business owners. And so you can expect that to take about 4 to 6 weeks for those updates to occur. But on the flip side, you don't have to wait through the phone tree and wait to long periods of time to speak to an actual person. So we'll put links in the show notes to resources we've created on IRS Form 8822 and 8822-B. Let's take a little bit more of a look at the details. So as redacted as they are, we can assume that these are all kind of numbers from the 2004 tax return, a tax increase with a corresponding interest increase, and then there's a negligence penalty. So as a result, you owe whatever the combined amount is right here. That's already the interest and the penalty is already kind of calculated into that total. But if you pay after March 23rd, then the IRS will have to recalculate any additional interest and any additional penalties that may be added to that overall tax bill. Generally speaking, though, your tax increase in itself should not go up, just penalties and interest. If you wanted to make a payment by mail, you can certainly take the little stub off the first page of the correspondence, the payment tab, and make out a check or a money order to the United States Treasury. You would write your Social Security number, the tax year, and the tax form number on your payment. And if you include any correspondence, make sure that information is on the correspondence as well. I always advise people that they should mail their payment to the address right here. Don't confuse that with the IRS address up here. They may be two different locations. So it's hard to tell here. All that information's redacted, but I've seen many notices where there are two different locations. You want to make sure that you just stick with the location that's on the payment voucher. So you can evaluate your options. If you can't make an immediate payment for your entire tax bill at one time, you can look at installment agreements. You can go to the IRS website and if your tax bill is low enough, I believe under $25,000, you may qualify for what's known as a streamlined installment agreement, where you can do everything online. Bigger tax bills, more complexity, you may be required to complete what's known as an installment agreement request, or IRS Form 9465. Again, we'll put links in the show notes to articles and videos we've created about those forms. So if you don't agree with the changes, you should call the 800 number, or you can fill out the contact information right here. Again, make sure that you include Social Security number, the tax year, and the form number on any correspondence. And again, send it to this address right here. But that would be for written correspondence. If you want to explain your difference in opinion, if you think you've got related information that may convince the IRS to change their assessment, you can absolutely submit that for consideration. So again, it may be worth calling the IRS just to have a conversation. They do record notes of the conversations that you have. So if you're requesting additional time, if you're trying to make sure you understand the requirements for what paperwork you're going to submit, you should be able to have, like, your record will be updated if you call the IRS and just either ask for the information so you can put together the package on your own. You can ask how many days you have to submit that written correspondence for consideration. So down here in page 3 is kind of a breakdown for the the penalties. So it looks like in this case there was a 5% penalty for unpaid tax. This is kind of a data reference. Returns due before 1989. There's an additional 50% underpayment for negligence. So generally speaking, any penalties that are imposed, you can't reduce your tax bill by those. You can't reduce your tax bill by the interest you pay on that penalty. So you can request that the penalty be removed. IRS Form 843 is that form that you would do complete to make that request. So you can request abatement for reasonable cause if you were hit by a natural disaster, or if there's a death in the family or a severe illness. You can request relief from the penalties because of demonstrated reasonable cause. If you, this section right here talks about if you requested advice from the IRS in writing on a particular tax issue, and then you relied on that advice, and the IRS came back and penalized you, even if after you gave complete and accurate information about your tax situation, you can also request a abatement for that reason. Relying on the IRS for written advice. You didn't mislead them. You gave them all the information. They gave you a recommendation. You followed that recommendation to the letter, and then they penalized you anyway. You can ask for relief. And then another thing that I would point out is that there's a program known as First Time Abate, where any person can request an abatement if they've never had penalties on their taxes before. And the IRS has a wide range of discretion. I'm not sure that it's unlimited discretion, but it's a pretty wide range of discretion for taxpayers that are going through this for the first time. So we'll put links in the show notes to the resources on IRS Form 843, and you can check them out. So the interest charges, you can't really request an abatement of interest charges, but if there's any penalties that get reduced or eliminated, if your tax bill goes down because of something that the IRS reconsiders, then they recalculate the interest. In this section, it kind of breaks down the interest charges by quarter, so that you can see during a certain time frame it was at 7%, and then it went to 8%, back down to 7%. This is all dictated by the Internal Revenue Code, and the IRS makes adjustments quarterly. So that's the schedule that they use. And again, any penalties that are eliminated, the corresponding interest would then be recalculated, so that you're only paying interest on the outstanding tax and remaining penalties if there are any. So, and then the last part of this notice is, again, the link to the IRS page. We'll just take a quick look at this. There's a bunch of frequently asked questions about payment plans, penalties. You can call the Taxpayer Advocate Service if you need assistance. There's also a form for that. You can file IRS Form 911 on that to request the Taxpayer Advocate to help you out. There are, the changes you propose are results of actions by my spouse. If your spouse did something, you may qualify for what's known as innocent spouse relief. So there's certain criteria that you would have to meet for that. Again, we'll put links in the show notes to that. But there's a wide variety of frequently asked questions that you can check out about payment plans, penalties, stuff like that. So decent amount of resources here. A lot of times these IRS pages are a mirror image of what's already in the notice. In this case, it seems like there's a little bit more information that you could actually get out of this. So I think that wraps it up for IRS Notice CP21E. I'll put links in the show notes to the articles and the videos that we've created about those tax forms mentioned earlier. So if you like our articles, please subscribe to our newsletter. If you like our YouTube videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, or if there's another topic you'd like to see in an upcoming video, please hit me up in the comments section. Thank you very much and have a great day.